Great. Okay, so we can start. Thank you. Hi. First of all, thank you for being here and taking your time to listen. We have a nice, cozy environment here. Hopefully, it will enrich your experience. So, yeah, let's start. I'm going to talk about ethics in software development. And so, if I don't know if you're watching the TV series Silicon Valley. Does anyone watch it? Great, some people do. So in the first season, there was this signature gag that took part during a TechCrunch Disrupt event. It's an event where you pitch your ideas to potential funders, and then they pick who they want to throw all the money at. And so the event in Silicon Valley, it was presented as a very nice parody, where every team was saying that, repeating this mantra that we're making the world a better place, be it through Paxos algorithms for consensus protocols or canonical data models to communicate between endpoints, which is not really how you make a world a better place. But this episode stuck in my head as a sort of manifest on how detached from reality we in our technology world sometimes get. And I've always been curious on whether we actually believe that we're making the world a better place. And that's what inspired me to be here today and start thinking about the ethical aspects of our work. And I wanted to start with showing you two documents. And as I was reading through literature and through articles preparing for this talk, I started to notice a pattern. And when I read interviews and so on, people were repeating their concern that software engineering doesn't have a code of ethics. That code of ethics is something that a lot of professions have, like doctors, business people, and so on, but also engineers, as in civil engineers. But software engineering is something that seems to lack a document like this. And for a long time, I couldn't find anything. You know, as I said, doctors, yeah, they have their codes of ethics, they have their separate documents. Then civil engineers, the public sector in general has codes of ethics and codes of conduct. You have business ethics for banking and so on, or how to not fraud money or launder money and so on. But for software engineers, seemed there was nothing. And so I wanted to show you a preamble to a code of ethics for engineers in general. And this was written years ago by the National Society of Professional Engineers, which is an organization created in the United States of America. And it goes, like you can see, it starts with saying that engineering is an important and learned profession. And as members of this profession, engineers are expected to exhibit the highest standards of honesty and integrity. Engineering has a vital impact on the quality of life for all people, and the services provided by engineers require honesty and fairness and equity, and must be dedicated to the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. And the preamble also says that engineers must adhere to the highest principles of ethical conduct. So I find this preamble refreshingly idealistic in this good way. And so this code of ethics was written for and by civil engineers. So people, as we can read later in the documents, people who hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And we cannot argue with such a statement. I mean, engineers build bridges, they design cars, they work with medical equipment, and they often work for the public sector. And the way they carry out their duties has both indirect and direct impact on the lives of everyone in this auditorium and way beyond it. And are we as software engineers or as people working with technology in general, like automation engineers, systems administrators, and so on, are we very different? That's a tough question. When I think about myself, I work in a company that produces, putting it simplistically, that produces text editing software. And we have clients like Facebook, PayPal, Lenovo. And what our software does, once again, simplifying it, is helps create a good marketing message or a documentation that that reads well and is easy to follow. But that's me. And in this auditorium and in TIAD today, we have people that work with the Internet of Things. We have people that write software for connected cars. We have people that work for medical companies or people that write, test, administer web applications that collect sensitive data on its users. So that kind of work, I think we can agree that that kind of work does have impact on safety, health, and well-being of the public. And the fact that most of us probably work in a private sector doesn't really change that. So after some research, I was positively surprised to find an engineering code of ethics specifically designed for software engineers. It's not that new. It has over 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And it was created by two North American organizations, here once again. One of them is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and the second one is the Association for Computing Machinery. And this code of ethics reads quite the same as the code of ethics for engineers in general. And you can see the link downstairs, the link on the bottom of the slide. I will upload the slides afterwards, and I highly and tweet about them, and I highly encourage you to read both of those codes. They're really interesting. And this code of ethics for designed specifically for software engineers is talks about the different areas of a software engineer's work, tries to outline best practices, touches on areas such as public interest, the environment, your relationship with clients and employers, working with coworkers, your self-development, and so on. And it reads, once again, it reads quite idealistic. And when we think about how in technology we're supposed to be moving fast and breaking things, how our dynamic world, when we think about our dynamic world of startups or VC funding or people throwing money at us for products that don't yet exist, some fragments of this code of ethics kind of make you I can't help to smirk when I read that. I, as a software engineer, I should approve software only if I have a well-grounded belief that it passes appropriate tests and does not diminish the quality of life, and that the ultimate effect of the work should be to the public good. Like, is all the software that we produce this like that? Or when I read that I should treat all forms of software maintenance with the same professionalism as a new development. It's hard not to smile when you think about how reality looks. But then again, is it a happy smile or a sad smile? Because is it the way it should actually be? So I talk about ethics, and there have been books written on the subject, and it's a topic that's been occupying philosophers and the like for centuries. So defining what is ethics and so on is way beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here. But I am a fan of defining terms when I'm going to use them. So just to quickly define, to make sure that we're all on the same side, ethical behavior, according to the Business Dictionary, is acting in ways consistent with what we as a society typically consider good values. And it also means demonstrating respect for key moral principles that include honesty, fairness, equality, and so on. And then if something is ethical, according to dictionary.com, it means it is in accordance with standards for right conduct or practice, especially the standards of our profession. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, the rest of the time today, I would like to spend looking at a few, giving you a few stories that showcase, I think, some of the problems that we might encounter during our everyday work. But I will start with a few honorable mentions that I will not dwell into, but I think that are also pretty important. And maybe in the end we'll have some time for questions. But I also encourage you, I would really like to get to know your opinions, so I'll be here for the rest of the day. So afterwards, it would be great if you wanted to talk to me. You don't have to ask a question right now. But I should finally introduce myself. So I'm Marta. I came to IT from studying English literature at university. I'm a dropout. I used to be a project manager for a huge localization company. I was also a freelance translator, doing some politics, like a lot of different things. And I like weird stuff. And when I say weird stuff, I say one time I'm interested in the parallels, the similarities, for example, between how programming languages, how the evolution of programming languages mimics the evolution of literature, or about I'm interested in how code can be treated as art, so that sort of weird stuff. And right now I hold the hilarious position of DevOps heroine at Acrolinks. We're based in Berlin. We're a Java, Clojure, Python, you name it, shop. And what I do there is I make our build infrastructure work and promote the DevOps mindset, and I sometimes talk people into changing the way to do things. Here's my Twitter, and afterwards I will publish the written version of this talk on my blog, because some people have ADHD, some people can't hear, and I think it's useful to have this sort of stuff in written form. Okay, so things that I will only mention. There's this quite short paper, but quite interesting paper by Ron Garris and Jennifer Lewis, linked down there, called Ethical Issues in Software Development, and they mention quite a few. But I wanted to mention, without dwelling into them, issues that you need to think about from an ethical perspective, such as using open source code in your code and properly crediting the source, or using legal software, which happens in big companies even today. You'd be surprised. Or how to handle reverse engineering. When is it ethical? When is it not? Or what about taking talent from the competition? And so the list of things one can ethically assess in their work as a software engineer is or a programmer in general, it's longer than a Christmas wish list of a 6-year-old, so you could just go on and on and on. But I will not be able to mention everything, but I do encourage you to question and explore also this sort of issues. For example, if I take a snippet code from Stack Overflow, should I credit the author? And if yes, then how? Or is it okay for my managers or for my HR people in my company to aggressively recruit talent from our competition? And if we do that, how will that influence the way my team cooperates with each other? Will it create a healthy work environment? Or what should I do when there's a licensing conflict in libraries I want to use? Sometimes this can be pretty painful when it turns out that you can't use something that you wanted because of a licensing conflict. And what do you do then? Story time. So a few years ago, a team of developers published an app that was supposed to help you meet new people, girls. It's called Girls Around Me. And you might remember that app. you also might not, because it's not the first app or the last app, unfortunately, that some people will create that will make us, the rest of us, lose faith in humanity just a little bit. So the app had a pretty high creepiness factor, as it allowed you to spy on people, girls, without them knowing. So it used the Foursquare API to look for girls, women, that are checked in your area, and then it fetched all their data from Facebook, because you could connect Foursquare to Facebook. And that data included the URL, their profile URL, their real name, their pictures, and eventually allowed you to send them a message on Facebook. So imagine, you're sitting in a coffee shop, or you're in a museum, you're in a museum exhibition, and you checked in on Foursquare because, sometimes, I don't know how popular Foursquare is still, but in its best days, people would, institutions or coffee shops and so on would have promotions or sales that if you check in on Foursquare, you get, free coffee or 50% off. So imagine you did that, and you're having a nice time by yourself and watching modern art and so on, and suddenly you get a Facebook message from someone you don't know, and you have no idea how they look, you have no idea who they are. They just write you that they can see you and they find you attractive and maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime. I mean, how would you feel? Would you be thrilled to meet them? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't. And then remember that the person that messages you is using an app that you did not sign up for, whose rules you did not consent to. And you have an app that you haven't installed, and an app that you would most probably despise. So, according to a quote I found in a New York Times article about this app, Foursquare wasn't really thrilled by the way their API was used. They said that it's a clear violation of their API policy and shut down the access to the API for that app. And then iTunes removed it, Apple removed it from their app store. And I checked, and it's not really available for Android anymore. So that seems like a close subject. But then again, you have apps like Tinder that also rely on Facebook, and they might also endanger their users. And culturally, unfortunately, will almost always be the women, the female users. Because some people will want to bypass the basic rule of Tinder, which says you can only reach out to people that liked you back. They will try to bypass that by stalking you, finding you, and contacting you through Facebook or Instagram, because you can connect your account to Instagram too. And it's a problematic bypassing of an app, and something that was probably not expected by its creators. And you might argue that this is what these women signed up for, or so why should they clicked yes, they agreed to terms of service and so on, but why would we accept that dating is supposed to be risky, and especially in this situation mostly for women? And is it fair that some of your users, as an app creator, is it fair that some of your users will be punished in a way for the behavior of your other users? Is that an ethical situation? And so the things to think about when building apps like that is we really need to ask ourselves, if we build apps for the purpose of connecting people, we need to think long and hard about how to make our users feel safe. Because consider all the data that you'd like to acquire from the users, and ask yourself, is it really the minimum, or do I really need that much? Is it necessary? And I'm pretty sure that no one in the right mind would want their products to cause pain or sorrows or distress. And helping users feel secure will actually make you positively stand out, unfortunately. And this making them feel secure can be achieved not only by letting them control what data they share, but also making sure that the product that you have will have clear and effective anti-harassment and anti-stalking policies. And unfortunately, this is still quite rare. But whatever you build, I think that Foursquare learned that they did not expect someone to use their API like that. Whatever you build, you need to keep in mind that users will always do things with technology that we didn't anticipate. And so it's impossible to anticipate everything. It's impossible to protect yourself and think of every plan, every possibility. But as creators, we are responsible for what we build. And we should keep our ears open and our minds open and react to situations. Like, for example, that API misuse. We're software engineers, and as the software engineering code of ethics says, the one that I quoted earlier, we should act consistently with the public interest. And technology moves fast, but that doesn't mean that all of the movement is for the better. And we shouldn't be forced, as creators, we shouldn't be forced to create unethical products, and at the same time, as users, we shouldn't be forced to adapt and compromise. There's a lot of questions here, and we can only touch the surface right now. But that's a few words about what kind of software we build. But then there's also the questions of how we build that software, because we work in different settings. We build different things, and the richness of software, of web apps, mobile apps, and so on that we create is mind-bending. And technology gives us so much, and it's absolutely wonderful. But we work in different settings. We work in startups. We work in big enterprises. We work in medium-sized firms. Our teams will differ, which means that we will have people on site, remotely, having occasional home office, and full-time, part-time, freelance. And sometimes if you work in the sharing economy, our software or our services will provide work also for others. And so we, as a technical workforce, I think I at least consider us to be quite privileged. I mean, we get a lot of perks. We get budgets to go to conferences. We get lots of conference swag. We get free lunches at work, ping pong tables. We get free alcohol in the office, flex time, and a lot more. I mean, whatever you can imagine. And we're also still young people, quite young, especially when you think about startups and and how we equate technology with youth. And so for a lot of us, working in technology, working in startups would be one of our first job experiences. And some of us will end up in companies that will use this lack of experience, and companies that will foster a work culture where it's okay, it's actually good to work long hours and stay late and never leave the office. And if you think about it, if you can eat in the office, if you work in the office, you enjoy yourself there, you socialize, and you sometimes can even sleep in awesome office of in a really nice location of the city. Like, who needs life outside of it? But it all looks, when you think about it, it turns out that it all looks great only for some people, mostly young people and mostly single people. But it's not an environment that will nurture people, like older people, people with families, people with children. And by fostering this sort of environment, we're actively predefining how our teams will look. That will be younger, that will be childless, and that will like parties. And you might be like that, you might not be like that. There's nothing wrong in being a young childless person who likes to party. Come on. But all these character traits have nothing to do with quality of our work. And by creating a work environment that only attracts people like that, we're limiting ourselves and leading to exclusion. Sorry. So I have the privilege of knowing IT professionals from a lot of different countries, and at first I was surprised to learn that some of them are in workers' unions. I mean, when you think about that, we're so privileged who needs workers' unions these days. And there were IT professionals from the UK, from Sweden, from Norway, from Germany, from rich Western countries, and yeah. What for, you might ask? And I was shocked at first, especially since I come from Eastern Europe, where this idea is quite despised. But when you think about it, workers' unions will be helpful in making sure that you do get a fair wage, because even though we earn a lot of money in general, some of us will earn way more than others, and will get and the differences don't always come from fair reasons. And workers' unions can support inexperienced employers or people from groups that are traditionally underrepresented in tech to make sure that people that are at a risk of getting worse job deals because of some biases that are often unconscious, and they don't come from bad will. And workers' unions work with companies to make sure that the needs of employees are also taken into account. And whatever your opinion on workers' union is, I understand might be different from mine, but I think that it's good to keep in mind that most often the relationship between workers' union and a company is not a relationship of war, but more of a cooperation, be it sometimes might be a slightly uncomfortable one. So think about your company. How does the situation look there? Do you have a workers' union? How's the approach to salaries? Is it acceptable for you to talk about salaries with your coworkers, or is it openly banned in your job contract? Is your company culture friendly towards people from underrepresented groups? Are they employed in your company at all? What about people with children or older people? Do you like the way your company looks? And all of those, the way your company will be set up, the way your workplace will be set up, is an outcome of decisions, ethical decisions, I'd say, putting it shortly, that you might or might not like. And it's good to think about that. And maybe there are things that are possible to change. And so some of us will be working as freelancers, as self-employed people, and there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of perks in that, and especially if we're IT professionals, we can afford doing that. We can pay our own. We get enough money to pay our own taxes and pay all of our insurances. So if it's so easy for some of us to be self-employed and to be freelancers, we might forget that it's not everyone's preferred way of work, and not everyone can afford being self-employed. And so the problem with the diminishing workers' rights and the fact that freelancing is being sometimes pushed on people, it's not something that IT is responsible for, and that something that we created, but it is something that companies like Uber, Deliveroo, or others propagate nonetheless. Because all those apps will push the message that they're helping people earn the extra buck just on the side, and that they offer freedom and independence. But if you talk with people, if you read articles, interviews with people who work for those companies, it paints a slightly different picture. So there's been a series of lawsuits, either in the past or coming, in different countries. I read about lawsuits in Germany, in the UK, in the United States, against companies like Uber, HomeJoy, Tricaviar, Postmates, eCourier, City, Sprint, so either delivery apps or cleaning apps. And those lawsuits are filed by people who are freelancing for them. So these people state that those drivers, the delivery people, those cleaners, want to be recognized as regular employees because all of them are self-employed, because that's how those apps work. They want the right to sick leave, they want the right to holidays, they want the right to have a pension fund and to insurance, things that probably a lot of us here take for granted, because even if we're either regular employees or we can afford getting all of that by ourselves. And for example, HomeJoy, which is a sharing economy cleaning app, will not let you specify commute time or any other aspect of your job. And that kind of stands in open conflict. Things like that stand in open conflict with what actually being an independent freelancer is. Handy, which is another cleaning app, will have all of their cleaners self-employed, but will still ask you to wear branded clothing, which, if you want to wear, if you're in most laws, if you can only require uniforms from regular employees, not from self-employed people. Or Uber, who calls drivers partners, but basically pushes everything on them. It's a very asymmetrical relationship. It seems that as if companies promoting the sharing economy want to have an apple and eat that apple. And people that freelancers, self-employed for companies like that, lack not only like health insurance and so on, but there's also a huge problem with the right to feel safe at work. If you work for a taxi company, let's say, then that taxi company will have procedures on how to react and help you when you're having trouble at work, when you have an aggressive customer who refuses to pay, for example, or someone who might want to hurt you. But in the case of Uber, what you can do is write an email afterwards, and that's about it. Or when you're a cleaning professional, you're getting work through sharing economy apps. You don't really get support or guidance when you get assaulted at work. Whereas if you worked in some companies that provide that you used to provide your services, they will not even let you to not work for a customer that you don't want to work with because of such experiences. And is that okay? And is that actually freedom that freelancing that comes to mind when you think of being self-employed? And of course you could say that all those people could just leave their work and find something else, but that kind of lacks perspective, because if those people could find better jobs, they probably would. And most of those apps will say that, as I mentioned before, that it's a way for you to get an extra buck. But I've read articles and studies that will repeat that a lot of the people that use the sharing economy apps for getting work will be, for example, people with an immigrant status, people from lower income that face prejudice and bias and legal obstacles when they want to work somewhere. So sometimes being an Uber driver is the only thing that they can do if they don't want to just sit and rot on welfare. And the reason why it's so it's really accessible and really easy to start using apps like that allow you to find cleaners and so on, and it's really cheap if you think about it. But do we think why those services are made that cheap? It's not the companies that pay for that have lower revenues. It's not us who lose. It's the people who offer their services. It's their lack of job security, of regular contracts, of their lack of insurance and of stability that makes those services that cheap. It's like the question of whether to buy sweatshop clothes, for example. The fact that they're so cheap means that there's a lot of suffering, most probably, involved there. And we might build apps with, I should repeat that again, that we might build apps with a specific target in mind, just say middle-class people that want to earn a buck extra buck delivering food. But we need to be aware of who really uses our app. And we might be technology companies and we might say, yes, a lot of those apps say that we are just providing a platform, but we're still responsible for the end users. And we should ask ourselves, is benefiting from people's hardships ethical? Or would we want our friends to earn a living using only sharing economy apps? That's a good test in general. Would we want our parents to do that? Is treating de facto employees as though they weren't employees and not providing them with the safety nets that they actually deserve, acting consistently with the public interest? That's written in a software engineer's code of ethics. Another story. So some years ago, in 2012, someone stole a password of a Dropbox employee, and as a consequence, Dropbox was cracked, and emails and encrypted passwords of around 70 million users got into the wrong hands. And Dropbox informed everyone and asked all the users to change their passwords, and then eventually introduced some changes, like now there's two-factor authentication and so on, to improve the situation. But at the same time, Dropbox seems to, don't know if you've read, coerce macOS users into giving their Dropbox app elevated privileges. So they kind of have a long way to go on the ethical front. But hacks are painful, like breaches are painful, and they're problematic, but they do happen and they will happen. And it's good to know how to react, have a plan how to react when something like that happens. And at least in the European Union, just a few months ago, introduced laws that would oblige companies from the so-called essential services sector, such as banking, transport, public health, and so on. It would oblige the companies like that. That includes also companies producing software to notify authorities of any breaches to its security within 72 hours or face fines if they don't. And that law comes into life in 2018. And it's a good step towards transparency, but still, there are no obligations for the users. I mean, they're supposed to be notified as soon as possible, but what does that actually mean? And I like the questions that security expert Tom Cheesewright asks, because it's a really complex ethical dilemma. We want to protect ourselves. We probably want to get the people who cracked us, but we also want to inform the users whose sensitive data is out there. How early is early enough, or how late is too late? Or it's a conflict between a lot of different forces, and unfortunately, usually the end users are the ones most vulnerable. And yeah, they signed your terms of service and so on, agreed to everything, but maybe we could have a little bit more empathy, because people don't understand software. And I'm not saying it as someone who's a technologist and yeah, I get everything. No, I'm one of those people. I don't understand software, even though I consider myself tech savvy. I don't read terms of service, and I assume most of you neither. And we don't often understand what data is being collected. We don't understand the risks. And the less tech savvy we are, the harder it is for us. And because of that, we cannot make fully informed decisions. And it's not about laziness or about being stupid. It's about the fact that technology moves so fast. Sorry. And it's hard to catch up. And also part of the, am I out of time? Okay, just lost. Okay, thanks. So part of the fault, we take part of the blame because of the way our terms of service and agreements are written. It's all in legalese, and of course there are legal, we want to have legal language and legally binding documents, but at the same time, if we want our users to make informed decisions and act in a more ethical way towards them, maybe we could also work on the language that we describe, in which we describe how we collect data and so on. And I really like, excuse me, and I really like the way Clue, which is a period tracking and health tracking app, deals with that. So they have a privacy policy that explains in very simple English or in other languages, because it's localized into quite a few, what data is being collected and how it is being processed. And it's making it easy to understand, and it's making it easy for me as an end user to make an informed decision and to actually know exactly what's being collected, where is it stored, and so on. And making sure that our users are making informed decisions about the use of our software is also in part with the software engineering code of ethics. It has to do with privacy, and when people share private things with us, they will be affected by any breaches or by any misunderstandings. Okay, so I gave you quite a lot of seemingly random stuff and stories, and you might be wondering, when will it all start making sense? I'll come back to a quote from the beginning. So I do strongly agree that we, as software engineers, of people who work in technology, have a huge impact on the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And you might not agree with some of the things that I said, with some of my opinions about workers' rights, or maybe I'm a socialist or whatever. But even if you don't, it's okay. I don't expect you to, and I would encourage a conversation. But I'd like you to take out from all the stories that I shared here, and the quotes from the codes of ethics. I'd like you to take out learn this habit of asking questions, of self-reflecting on your work, because technology is not something that exists in a vacuum. It used to maybe in the beginning, but nowadays it's developing so quickly and so on that we have more and more impact on lives of more and more people, and it means that it's inevitable to ask questions and to have those emerging codes of ethics, and that's a good thing. And I think that's what I wanted to finish with. Thank you very much for listening, and I think we have about 2 minutes, 40 seconds for questions, or there's lunch probably starting now, so maybe you want to go to lunch. I'll be around here. Yeah, thanks. There's a question. Okay, so the question is whether the professional zone and the ethical zone are just two separate things. Well, it's a good question, and I think they're really intertwined, especially if you look at how those codes of ethics are usually specialized for a profession, because different profession, like banking, will have a different looking codes of ethics. And if you read the document, you should visit this code of ethics for software engineering. You'll see that the questions and the issues that are raised there, it's, for example, stuff like self-development or treating end users and customers with respect and so on. So things that are both ethical and professional. And also stuff like environmental protection is also mentioned in the code of ethics. It's something that we also might not think when we develop software. So I think that those things are really, really closely knit together. No. It's 2 PDF pages. Small text. Okay, thanks once again, and feel free to approach me later during the day.